So let me tell you a story about the problem of integrating scholars and practitioners. Michel Crozier and I had worked over the years to how do we increase the dialogue between the two. And I don't remember how long it took, but Michel called and said, we're going to have a meeting in Paris, and we know you're going to come. Could we meet make it easier for you right outside, or at that time, Orly was the airport, and let's have a session with some CEOs and so on. And I thought this was terrific. And so I arrived, I remember it was around 10 o'clock, and there must have been 8 or 9 senior executives and at least 12 scholars, young scholars, Michel and myself. And Michel was the chairperson for the session. And we emphasized there would be a dialogue. There would not be people lecturing each other, and that was fine. We started. But what impressed me, and I said to Michel privately, and I said to the scholars publicly, I did not know if I could trust them. And they looked at me, and I said, he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, one way for me to understand human beings and for they to understand me is how I craft my questions about how to understand reality. And if the question is crafted in such a way that it is not testable, I worry. It could be a CEO or it could be a scholar. But frankly, most of the questions that were not testable came from the scholars and not from the line executives. And I remember in one case, and now I'm thinking, I said to one of these young scholars, how do you know that's true? Trust me, Chris, I know France. And I remember saying to him, you know what you're asking me to do? You're asking me to believe your claim, and the only way I could do it is to think the way you do. Now, maybe I should, but don't coerce me to think the way you do in that manner. Help me to see the limits of where I'm at and what can I... Well, they were sort of baffled. They talked about culture being different. To me, it was then nonsense. It's still nonsense. In my work, there are no differences between French people and Americans or Indonesians and so on in the area of organization. They speak different words, but the theories in their heads are the same. For example, all over the world, there is a theory in use about how to handle people nicely. The British call it being civilized. The French saying being, as I recall, concerned. Well, when I study what is it that they say and do, they use different words, but the theory behind what they produce goes something like this. If you think you have to say something that will be upsetting to another person, do it in such a way that he can't hold you responsible for upsetting. And so you bypass the threat, you cover up that you're bypassing, and you cover up that you're covering up. Well, come on, Nixon did that, and I've seen it done all over the world by scholars and by executives. I found cultural differences in this area as superficial.